Welcome and thank you guys for having me here at your November monthly meeting. My name is Nick Sturgeon. For those of you who don't know me, I am on the town council, but I'm actually here in my professional role. I've been in cybersecurity for about 15 plus years and in IT in most of my career. I spent about 8 years as an Indiana State Trooper and also spent some time as a reserve Speedway officer. So I've been in this area for quite a bit. And when Bonnie asked me to speak on cybersecurity, not too long ago, I spoke at a chamber luncheon on something a little bit similar, but I've actually been working on this particular presentation on personal cybersecurity for the last couple of months. And this gave me a good opportunity to present this, and really this presentation is designed specifically for folks at home, whether at school, college, and just a wide audience, not your typical business perspective, because there's a lot of things going on and with technology now, and AI is a big part of that. It's the biggest buzzword probably that you may be hearing and seeing on commercials and everything. So wanted to come up with a presentation to really talk about what you can do at home and why it matters. Because frankly, I think there's still a bit of a, well, it'll never happen to me, but I'm sure I would probably bet $1,000 at least that everyone in here has received a breach notification of some sort, probably even within the last 12 months. So that's why it matters. You know, the data, it's like, well, it's just my name or my social security number. Well, that has an impact, and you may not see it right now, but eventually you could. I know not only from what I see in my professional circumstance, and I'm currently the Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Community Health, but I've seen it personally during COVID when all of the federal funding was coming out for tax relief and stuff like that. I had my identity stolen, and it took me a good 2 years to get everything sorted with the state government because somebody had got a hold of my identifiers, name, social security number, date of birth, and so on, and filed on my behalf for that fraudulently to receive that federal money. And it took me a good 2 years to finally get everything situated with the Indiana Department of Revenue and the Department of Workforce Development. And it was the biggest pain in the butt that I had to deal with. And I deal with this on a daily basis. So like I said, I've been on both sides of this issue. Bill, if you want to go ahead and bring up the title slide. Please don't, if you have questions as I'm going along, don't hesitate to ask. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. So just an introduction. We're really going to, I'll send the presentation out so you guys can have it. But really talking about how you protect your personal identity, financial identity, AI, how you have your home internet set up, because all of that stuff really goes into addressing how you keep your self secure. Next slide. So protecting your information, again, as I mentioned, it's like, why does this matter? If they already have it out here, why should I, even bother when, there's a nation states, China, Russia, North Korea, all of these that have highly sophisticated stuff, and they already have it. But why should we continue to protect it? Well, it's not only your financial future or your reputation, but it could affect your kids and grandkids as well. And it also, it's about who you guys do business with. you see these companies that are doing the right thing when it comes to cybersecurity. You should do business with them. If these companies are not taking your privacy and the security of their systems the way that you feel like you should, you need to do business elsewhere. Because I think that's really one of the ways that if we as a collective in society say we're not going to do business with companies who are not doing what they need to do to protect our data, your data, then, vote with your dollars. And then part of this is, social media as well. And I've been a big proponent of social media, from being able to connect with friends, also on what I do on the political campaign using social media. It's a great way to reach a lot of people quickly. But on the personal side, I've been really, really protective about who I become friends with, making sure that I know the people that I'm connecting with. It isn't just, somebody, I don't know, it could be a fake account, could be somebody pretending. I don't know how many times that when my dad was still alive, I would get friend requests from him, and I'm like, all right, this is a fake account. And if I got one from him right now, I would be a little bit shocked because it said he did pass away a couple years ago. So all of these things add up. And it's the little things that you do now that really help make a big impact later down the road. And a lot of this is driven by data. Not these big criminal groups, even these adversarial countries, it's all about the data, whether for financial gain, which is there because there's a going rate for health records on the black market. There's a going rate for social security numbers. And you think about some of the national security concerns that we're seeing with potential, terrorists coming across the border. They could have legitimate social security numbers that they have got for people to use to get jobs and some other things, file fraudulent tax returns, things like that. So it is about money. It is about power. Next slide. It may, like I said, seem like an overwhelming thing about, well, if the data is already there, why even bother? If you get a compromised credit card, get rid of it. Chase, PNC, all of the big banks do a pretty good job about issuing new credit card numbers once those get reported as stolen. And compromised social media accounts. That's a big way. Not only do the tech companies do a lot of data mining, but the bad actors, or even the local thieves, will monitor who's around Christmas time and Thanksgiving, or in the summertime when a lot of people take vacations. They're looking at those social media accounts to say, hey, is so and so home? They're posting pictures in Florida or California or Hawaii or wherever. They're out of town. Guess what? House is free game. So it's having that balance of, I want to share that information and do it rightly, but not also just announcing to the world that, hey, I'm not home, and potentially opening yourselves up to a target for theft or vandalism. Also, some of the things you're seeing too for those kids or grandkids, cyberbullying, stalking has been an issue. Child predators, sex trafficking, those things, social media, the internet, unfortunately, does have that dark side, and not, if you, again, for your kids or grandkids, making sure that they know what they're posting and that they're not potentially setting themselves up to be taken advantage of. And taking, again, which do all these little steps and, watching what you post, when you post, what types of information you're putting online, all of that does matter and it will make a big impact. Next slide. Some other things too, when you're out and about, getting that Starbucks or, going to the local McDonald's or, any of these places that offer free Wi-Fi, it's not just connecting to it because those can be easily compromised. There's ways that bad actors will set up a man-in-the-middle attack, literally, where they're positioning some technology to be able to reroute or see passwords and to your banking account, usernames, and all those things that need to be kept secure. Yeah, go ahead.
Even if you go to a place and they have Wi-Fi, but they say this is the password, should you not do that?
Yeah. So.
Just never.
Yeah, one of the, and I'll get into this later, but shared passwords, shared accounts, you don't want to do it. You want to keep that information to you. I think it's,
Sure that you enter their password at a restaurant.
Yeah, most of the time, and most cell phones nowadays connect to the internet. Just utilize that connection. If you're at a friend's house or your work or, somewhere where you can trust, that's okay. But, these businesses, if it's just open out there, you need to be, careful about connecting to those because you don't know what they are doing on the security if they are taking security seriously. Another thing too is plugging things into the USB power to power up. There's devices out there that connect, then can compromise or read your information off your phone, off of your iPad. So like going to the airport, they use the outlet, but you got to be cautious about using just the USB to power your device, phone, iPad, tablet. And it's quick too.
So I logged into the Speedway guest Wi-Fi for this building. So there is a blurb that talks about it. If I do need to get onto Wi-Fi, should I be looking for something like that?
You'd be looking for that. Make sure it's a secured connection. And one of the ways that it's visually, you'll see the lock or you'll see HTTPS. That is one way to know that it's a secured connection. The other thing too with that is, on a privacy side, if you look, I don't know, most people don't read the terms and conditions because it's a bunch of legalese and you just want to get into. But a lot of times they will say they will monitor your connections, and you, by making the connection and clicking accept, you accept all of those terms. And I think, being here at the town, we do take cybersecurity seriously on the town, and it is protected. But at McDonald's or, again, some of these others, you just don't know. And it's also easy to clone. There's devices out there that can overpower the Wi-Fi signal and mimic what's the SSID. It's the display name of the Wi-Fi. And it will say, oh, I'm going to go and have you connect to that device instead. So there's a lot out there, and it is cybersecurity is not easy, unfortunately. And this is why I think in the industry, one of the criticisms I've had is we make it overcomplicated, and we try to make it like we're the only ones that can solve it, and think simplifying it for the masses has not been well done in the industry, unfortunately. Some of the things, set up multi-factor authentication, that it's a separate app that will send you a code that says, hey, somebody's trying to log in. Is this you? You either click accept or you punch in a number. Those things will help fight, because if your password gets compromised, username gets compromised, then that second factor does a pretty legitimate, good job of keeping somebody out, because they have to hit that number, or hit the accept button, or get you get a text message that's asks you to enter in a 5 to 6 digit code depending on what it's set up. There's also, endpoint protection, old school virus protection. Windows in current versions like Windows 11, Windows 10, Microsoft Defender, which is pretty native anymore, does a pretty good job. But like Trend Micro, or there's a couple. I'm not a big fan of Norton. This is me personally. I'm not. There's some that just are actually more spyware than actual virus protection. But getting something in addition to help block those viruses, block the ransomware from being able to function. If you've got Android or iOS or any of those computers, when it says, hey, it's time to update, because a lot of times in those updates, there's security patches along with it that will go to address any issues that may have been found between updates. Go to the next, and then to the next one after that. Got a little bit ahead of myself. So I know one of the things I have on here and on mine is I've got the PIN code. So I've also got Face ID. Well, there's a couple of schools of thought on the biometrics. Legally, if you were to get in trouble, police can just go and scan it. The PIN code, whether 4 or 6 digit or whatever, it's set up for your personal device. They can't force you to log in and to give your password up. So there's some choices there to be made. I think for convenience, Face ID works for me. That's what I have set up. But I would say at least minimum is to set a 6-digit PIN up on your phone to get into. Also go in and change privacy settings. A lot of these apps will ask for everything. It's like, why does a Starbucks app or McDonald's or some of these others, I'm picking on them, I don't mean to, but they're asking for your contacts information. Why does a food ordering app need to know my contacts information? Or why does it need to, they save for the location so it knows which one you're at. It's a convenience thing. And some people like the convenience. Others, you can still type in the address or a zip code. That's what I do. It's like, so just be picky on what information you're sharing, and it takes some time, but I think it's worth the effort to go in to make sure we're not oversharing information to the companies, but also again, if something happens, that information could be shared to other people, and especially what you share to these companies, that when they get breached, because it happens, then that's information that the bad actors are getting, not directly from you, but for the companies that we're sharing information with. Next slide. I know there's a ton more here, and I know I'm not going to get through everything. And I'm trying also not to just scare everybody to death. But this really is about power. What we know and how we educate ourselves, and not just blindly. Well, this is what it says. That education is power. So, going up and again taking the time, setting up, making it a little bit more difficult for the bad guys goes a long way. The one advice I will put here on financial security is go to, Equifax or one of the credit bureaus and freeze your credit. It's free to do. And if you happen to need to, get a new credit card or a new loan or whatever, it's easy to unfreeze. Again, it's free. But this will help somebody from, that would have your social security number, your date of birth, address, all that stuff, to go and sign up for credit and then ruin your credit. And thankfully from personal experience, I've not had this yet, but I know of horror stories where people's credits are ruined, and it takes years and years and years to get that corrected.
You have to go to every single one?
No, if you go to the Federal Trade Commission, and I've got some links that are included in this presentation that you can go to, and it will tell you how to go. I think if you go to one, it would only be that one, but I think through the FTC, there's a way to do freeze it for all of the 3 major credit bureaus. On to the next slide. I talked about this a little bit on social media. Just, be careful about what information that you're putting up. I referenced my dad and the numerous fake requests that I'd get from him. They go copy the picture and they'll put it in there, and they'll make those fake accounts. And you've seen this out in the over the last couple of years, where even locally where these fake accounts get set up, or even account where that goes to attack the credibility of an individual, which could cause issues at school. It could cause issues at work. So the way that we protect against that is by being careful about the information we freely post on social media. I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, that is an option, but you just have to be careful about what information that you put out there. Yes.
So do you have, you personally, since you're like a public official, do you have your public, your job, social media, but then you also have your private?
Yeah, so I've got my personal Facebook page that it's private, and then I do have my page for my political office. So if somebody wants to reach out to me in my official capacity, I say, okay, here's this, and interact here. And the rules for that as an elected official from a constitutional perspective is pretty clear. It's people engage in the constitutional activities, and I can't just go and delete the content or the comments that I don't agree with, because that's protected speech. But on my personal page, and I've got it very clearly just separated. This is my elected official page, and this is my personal page. So you could have that even for yourselves, one that's private and one that's public. And the one that's private, you can really keep it narrowed down to close friends, family, and you could have the other one that's open. Now it takes a little time. I mean, to manage both of them, but that's one tactic that you could do to help protect. Next slide. Yeah. And then again, and this, when we get into AI and we talk about the deep fakes and, the technology with, like ChatGPT 5, and it's really good. And it doesn't take a whole lot of skill, unfortunately, to take an image, over a couple images and come up with a really, really similar copy or digital avatar of someone. And if you're like me, that someone's been out in the public eye for a while, it's done podcasts and interviews and things like that, and it's got my voice on record, and you can come up with a pretty decent, again, replica or digital avatar. Marco Rubio recently had an issue with a deep fake. And those videos like you see on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, and that are fully 100 AI generated, are really lifelike. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I mean, but all of that information that we're posting, you see how that compounds and makes it easier for these bad folks. So, not posting passwords, or, you see a lot of kids, now, parents with their kids posting their, driver's license, that they get, printed out from the BMV, and it's just there. All you have to do is zoom in. You've got your driver's license number, home address. I could really boil it down to situational awareness. Just like when you're out in the real world, you need to be aware of your surroundings. The same concept is on, the internet. Just be aware of your surroundings. Be, aware of, again, the things that you're putting out there. Yeah, next slide. Again, a lot of the same themes you'll hear through. It's about controlling what you share, reviewing the privacy, knowing who you're connecting with, and then, just being careful and taking that little extra step. It's great that, hey, look at, man, I had this great time, out boating in the Atlantic or whatever. That can wait till you get home. Go ahead, next slide. This a little bit more technical, but if you have YouTube's out there, or if you've got somebody somewhat technical, not just having your home Wi-Fi open for anybody to go, and just setting up a password. A lot of AT&T now does a lot of stuff. I just, as an example, because I use this at home for myself, where it's scanning for viruses and it's blocking sites and it's telling me, hey, this may be a concern, and it's, they're just building it in to make it easier. So those are things I would recommend too, is look at what Verizon or Comcast or what security features that they're just building in as part of the service that you're paying for. Go ahead, next slide. And, whether it's, kids, grandkids, or for those like myself, maybe with my dad, my mom's a little bit more tech savvy than my dad was, but it's, talking with them, just making sure, especially those elderly that may be a little bit more susceptible to, those type of scams. It's talking with them, protecting and making sure that, just aware and keeping an extra eye out. Well, again, whether it's kids or on one end of the spectrum or the elderly on the other, because you will see, specific groups go after those two different age groups. There's a lot of social engineering, which is basically human manipulation, is a lot of what is geared to just the general. Hey, I will say, as an example, Microsoft, Apple will not call you to say, hey, you've got an issue with your computer. They just don't do that. And that's a big scam. I've heard a number of scams and people affected, with it. Oh yeah, Microsoft called me and said, hey, we noticed an issue with your computer, and I let them in, and now I can't get into my computer because they put ransomware on it. Or, oh, they wanted me to put in my bank information to pay them, and now they're out hundreds or thousands of dollars. It's disgusting. And some of that, again, it's just a matter of taking the time to think if that's there. But it's about education. And part of why I love doing these type of things is, and talking with folks like yourselves, is to provide some of that education. It's not to scare. I know it may be, it comes off maybe like, oh my God, it's overwhelming, but it's any little thing, like I said, that you can do, take those little extra steps will help. Go ahead, next slide. One of the things, I mentioned this, even from our personal standpoint, is if it does happen, it is a very, very stressful time to deal with, whether it's the IRS because somebody's filed a false tax return, or in my case it was the COVID tax relief that the federal government gave back. That's just hours on the phone. Thankfully that didn't cost me any money out of my pocket, other than just the heartache of, why am I getting another letter from the Department of Revenue saying that they're going to withhold my taxes because of this claim, and having to explain to 5 different people at the Department of Workforce Development every time why am I getting this letter? I thought I did everything that you guys said I needed to do. And imagine if that's your life savings. And another personal example, my dad, somebody got a hold of his Amazon account and bought and spent $8,000 worth of stuff on Amazon, and fighting with, my brother and sister-in-law were fighting with the bank. I fought with the bank, and that's, at the time, that was a lot of money for my dad, because just his personal situation at the time, or in some, there's, thousands and thousands of dollars that people lose, and most of the time you're probably not going to get that money back. It's just gone. And that stress and fear of, what am I going to do, how am I going to live if this happens? And unfortunately, there are folks out there that have had to deal with that, and it is not, I couldn't imagine going through it. Next slide. For my age group, I'm a late Gen Xer, early millennial. I don't like to think that I'd call myself a millennial. I was born in 81. I grew up with no internet, and it was at high school when the internet first came out. And I just happened to be in that generation that it was analog, as a kid, digital as adult. Look at the, like my kids and their generations, that they've known nothing but digital, but they don't necessarily know how it works. It's all about literacy, whether you're older or younger. It's that information is power. You may not have to know how the computer works, but understanding the consequences, or understanding, that education is power. And again, it's more than just knowing how it's used. anybody can turn on a computer, but understanding how the data is being sent, where it's going, how it's being used. It is taking the time to read the terms and conditions and not literally giving up your entire rights to that data when you hit accept. And sometimes it may just be worth not downloading the app to play that game. Next slide. And I think increasing your digital literacy will not only have the proper benefits of protecting your information, but it also would help at work. It will help at school. With AI coming up and the impacts it's going to have on our society, being ahead of that curve is going to be even more important than ever. Next slide. And speaking of AI, I talked about this. We're just at the surface of understanding the effects of AI from a cybersecurity perspective. Again, I could pull up my phone right now and find probably 30 fully AI generated videos that look absolutely flawless. There are some things that just the way that the mouth moves or the people, how they move or interact kind of bleed in together. There's still some things where it's not perfect, but it's getting there. And how do we, if I have got a perfect rendition of my voice and that some bad actor is using that to call out and do bad things with, how are we going to, as a human, be able to spot that? It's going to be difficult. Early, it's like we're going to have AI fight each other. It's going to, fight fire with fire, as they say. But it just amplifies the what's called vishing, which is voice phishing or phishing scams. So AI just the veracity and veracity of the attacks and the things that are coming because of AI are just exponential. And basically everything a human can do, it will do exponentially faster and even better in some cases. The days of the Nigerian prince schemes where it's just horrendous English and grammar are pretty much over. And so unfortunately, it's going to be that much more difficult for us as individuals to spot. And that's where taking the time to think, hey, did my boss really send me this email? Or, hey, I've heard of scams where, a bad actor, hey, call an elderly person and say, hey, I'm your grandson. I'm in jail. Well, I just talked to my grandson like 2 minutes ago. There's no way, he could be in jail. Or, just thinking, it's, that critical thinking aspect of it to say, does this sound right? Because a lot of these bad actors will use a sense of urgency of something going wrong to trick you into making a hasty decision. And just taking that time to think about it will do, stop, think, connect as one of the things that I've said out there in the past. But it is just stop, take a breath, assess the situation. Next slide, this should be about the last one. Again, same thing. Be careful about the information you post. Understand the privacy settings, what data you're sharing. Think critically. If you see these bad accounts, report them to the social media or to the providers. Don't also over rely on AI as well, and then stay informed. Again, that education is power. And with that, there's the resource slide next, which again, I'll share the presentation out. And Bonnie, you can hand it out to the group. And there's a lot of the information there will be able to go in through if you have issues or want to learn a little bit more. Can take the time to, again, to educate yourself.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about like Google, would it ask you like to save your password? You know what I mean? It's really-
Yeah. So
You never do that?
I do use a password manager. I don't. There are a number out there. I use from a company called BIT Warden, just like prison warden. There's some others. 1Pass. I use an app like that, so I only have to remember the one password. I do have multi-factor authentication set up. I also use a security key to then also use for certain things as an extra layer. My financial sites that are able to use it, I use it there just to give it that extra layer. The old adage, you don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the guy next to you. And that's kind of the thing there. If you just make it a little bit more difficult, these criminals are lazy and they want the easy score. And so if you can make it a little bit more difficult, then they'll move on. But I would not put it in whether you use Chrome or Edge or Firefox or Safari, I wouldn't save it in the browser. Those are easy to hack. There's info stealers out there. And all it takes is you go into one website, having that downloaded. So something like that password manager application is a little bit more secure. It's not foolproof by any means, but it is more secure than saving it in the browser. Or if I'm an Apple person, Mac, the keychain or the password manager in the phone is pretty good. But again, you got to watch when you're downloading other apps to make sure it's not trying to access that. Any other questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah.